It's time for the Access of Easy podcast, the weekly technology digest that keeps you ahead of the curve. Brought to you by EasyDNS.com.
Friends, welcome back. I almost ripped them with the friends and enemies there, Len. Welcome back to another episode of Access of Easy. This is number, as if I didn't have this up already, 338. 338. Access of Easy.
I'm happy between CBP.
I know. It's funny. I closed my email here. I always have the email up from Tracy just to do the quotes and stuff. Anyway, good to see everybody. Len, good to see you too, buddy. What's going on?
Yeah, just living a dream, man. Getting ready for spring. It's getting warmer and warmer every day. More daylight every day. It's going to be very nice. It's been a good winter, by the way. Not much snow. And man, oh man, I still want to go play some golf. But it's
knock on wood. I don't know why you're talking like this without knocking on any wood. We got like 6 weeks to go. If we can make it through 6 more weeks, we're good.
I'm not superstitious though. Whatever happens, happens. So superstition doesn't bother me. I'll break glass. I'll step on a crack. Doesn't matter.
Petting every black guy you see.
Yeah, I make sure I walk past them multiple times. Yeah, so whatever happens, happens. Fate will dictate my life.
Funny. Yeah, it's good, man. I'm glad to hear that. I noted to myself the other day driving to work that I have made the change just solely based on weather and internal desires that are beyond my conscious mind. I stopped listening to podcasts on the way to work. Now I'm blasting the music again. So I don't know. That's like a sign for me. That's like my internal Groundhog Day clock. Winter's almost over. Sun's out longer. Days getting longer. EDM is playing in the car on the way to work instead of the latest and greatest in data breach and overreach. And you should not do that, by the way, listener, viewer. You should be listening to this podcast on the way to work. 365.
And I'm the inverse. When it gets warmer, I tend to listen to more podcasts because I'm out and about doing stuff. When I'm inside, which I tend to be more in the wintertime, I'm doing other things than listening to podcasts. If you look at my podcast playing, like the minutes I dedicate to listening to podcasts, drastically reduces in the wintertime. But in the summertime, it's just almost unlimited. It's funny. We're the exact opposite.
Yeah, that's weird. That's good. Hey, man, let's listen. Differences make life spicy, right? I definitely botched that quote. But anyway, here's a quote I won't botch. Last week's quote of the week. All conflicts between people are a direct consequence of the division that exists inside of people. That was by Ivan Antich or Antic. I don't know how to say it.
Antich, that's correct.
Nobody got it, Len. So that's the first time anyone's ever uttered that name on air, and it may be the last. This week's quote: there is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. That's by someone. If you know who it's by, listener, viewer, make sure you say who you think in the comment section, accessoreasy.com, and you get your next renewal on the house. There's some truth to that, by the way. I've been writing a little bit more for the Canadian Bitcoiners website, and I'll cop to the fact that I've had some AI help. I personally prefer editing something to writing it, but I know that if I just put something down, the rest of the process will be easy, even if that beginning part is hard. Do you find the same? Are you much of a writer?
I'm neither. I find both of those tasks basically the same. I'm not more fond of one than the other. So they are what they are. So I don't, if I had to maybe pick one, maybe writing would be better. But I'm just throwing a dart here. Who the heck knows? I just want to say this guy mentions typewriter, so it's time stamping the time in which he said this. So take this to heart, people. Hopefully this will help you narrow down who it is that said it.
Maybe he's one of these traditionalists who still bangs away at the typewriter. I have a mechanical keyboard, so I sympathize with that group. Anyway, we got full slate here. Bunch of stories, latest, greatest, data breaching, overreaching, as you know. Where do you want to start?
There's QR codes, man. There's a scam going on out there with QR codes, and the FBI is alerting people about a new scam tactic that is exploiting the popularity of QR codes. And those little square barcodes, they've used them, I suppose. If not, check it out, but be careful when you use it, by the way. I'll explain why. These are designed to offer quick access to information. And typically they have URLs associated with them, but it's not all the time. Well, these QR codes, they're being tampered with by cybercriminals. And it's being used to lure unsuspecting victims into digital traps. And it's doing so, well, just imagine you're going to scan a QR code on a flyer that you see out there for maybe a local discount store. You're expecting a quick link to their website, and you're excited to see what kind of deals you're able to get. But unwittingly, you've been redirected to a malicious website. And the deceptive web page you think is the real McCoy, well, they're crafted in such just to show that it is a fake, but it's designed to steal your information. When you put in your login credentials, financial information, all that stuff, it will take that. Also, there's a possibility that it could infect your device with harmful malware. And surprisingly, it's the FBI. They're the ones that are out there that are sounding the alarms here. They're urging people to exercise caution when you use QR codes, and especially those that are found in the wild. So if you see a QR code attached to a lamppost, be careful when you scan it. If you do, make sure that it's the right thing. And you got to be trusting when you're dealing with these QR codes. And they even are saying here that if you are falling victim to a QR code scam, you have to, don't be hesitant to report this to the FBI's Internet Crime Compliance Center, the IC3. And they have dedicated resources for these type of things. So I'm not sure about people out there, how they use QR codes. Actually, I have a dedicated app for that. And it's actually an open source app that I got from, I forget the website. But anyways, it's an open source app that I have that I use to check it. And every time I do check a QR code, still, it doesn't automatically open up a URL. I look at it. I see what it is. And I'm always wary what is on there. I don't know why, but it's always the case. And it's similarly, when I use that for Bitcoin, typically in order to facilitate a Bitcoin transaction, you'd scan a QR code. That's typically how things are done. Still, I look at it and I make sure that a bunch of numbers match up to the original, what I have scanned initially from my computer. So right. I'm very worried about QR codes. They are good. They make things very easy. But again, if you're lazy and you're just willy-nilly just scanning stuff, you could be subjected to an attack. So the onus is on you to make sure that you're not just clicking on stuff that shouldn't be clicked on. These QR codes, they're great and all, but they come at a cost.
I don't really like QR codes, to be honest with you. I don't think they're that great. They're kind of convenient, but like you mentioned there's just too much wiggle room. It's almost impossible for anyone who's not, a Spectrum dweller to identify differences in two QR codes at first glance. That's pretty important. I would never just go to a website and not check the address or not check the security or whatever, in the browser tab or the browser window. This is really akin to that. And I'm not sure why people are still using these things, to be honest with you, Len. We talk a lot about how the security apparatus hasn't really kept up with the attack vectors that keep appearing in different silos of your phone, your computer, your security setup, your VPN we've talked about before. Why do people think that this is any different? I don't know. Who's using QR codes? I'm in my 30s. I haven't scanned a QR code in a long time. I see them at the gym. I see them on TV. I see them all over the place. They're basically trying to drive you to a product page or a service page most of the time, or a social media page. I just don't care. Like they don't really appeal to me as a way to access information. Are you a fan of them? I mean, this is a bit of I think an odd thing. I don't think a lot of people are using these things the way that they were intended to be used years ago. They were all the rage, maybe mid 2010s, but now I don't really hear a lot of people talking about them, to be honest with you.
It's mostly for Bitcoin transactions. That's what I see.
That's it, right? So wallet addresses, yeah.
Yeah, so when I purchase it from Bull Bitcoin, it asks for an address to be sent to. So that's what I tend to use it for. Other than that, just the odd one here and there. I just took a look. So what I use is something called QR and barcode scanner. So I got that from F-Droid, in case anybody's wondering. It's open source. You could analyze the code to make sure there's nothing going on with it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the frequency I use, that very minimal.
I figured.
Yeah. All right. French government. There's a story about them because they voted and passed a bill called, this is translated, of course, the bill to strengthen the fight against sectarian excesses and improve the support of victims. It's so messed up.
You want to rate the name? 0 out of 5.
0. But one of the sections of this bill, and it's namely Article 4, that's the one that is contentious here. And that's the one people are looking at and saying, what the heck is going on? And they're dubbing this part of the bill, Article 4, as Pfizer articles. Okay. So the gist of it is now a crime to push what they deem to be abandoned medical care. That's translated from the bill. So if you're critical of medical treatment through either speech or actions, remember, speech or actions, you could be jailed up to 1 to 3 years and also fined between $15,000 euros to 45,000 euros. That's a significant amount of money. And that's a decent amount of time you're spending in jail. And when I'm talking about actions, it's essentially trying to avoid recommended treatment, such as imposed vaccine. So take this for what it's worth, right? So the problem of this, the bill, it's vague in its writing and how it can be interpreted. So if you're looking at the way it's written, it's very difficult to ascertain exactly what it is you're trying to achieve here. So because it's so vague, regulators, law enforcement, and judges, it's going to be a broad application in terms of how they're going to be looking at this and interpreting it. So it's going to be something that's going to have to be administered moving forward, and the judges will have the last say in this. And it's going to be interesting to see how the French courts handle this. When you have a bill that is not clearly defined, somebody then has to interpret it. And if it's a judge that's going to be imposing a sentence, it can have drastic implications on somebody's life. So personally, to me, I can't believe that they would allow and pass such vague text in a bill. But this is the French government. I'm not familiar with how things operate over there. So this could be par for the course, or this could be an anomaly. I have no clue, but nonetheless, something very interesting.
I don't think it's par for the course. The big problem I have is with the first sentence here. The provocation to abandon or abstain from therapeutic or prophylactic medical treatment shall be punishable by 1 year's imprisonment, blah, blah, blah. What do they mean by provocation? If I think back to the COVID, really peak COVID era, let's say, 2020 and 2021, when the vaccines were rolling out here in Canada and other places, there was a lot of talk about how saying things like eating healthy was a medical misinformation tactic, staying fit, taking vitamin D, taking, what was that thing Rogan was on? They were saying was horse paste or whatever, but is actually used, all over the world and has received a Nobel Prize in medicine for its effectiveness. I forget what it's called. Hydroxychloroquine, right? So now that I've listed all the buzzwords to get us banned from YouTube, I'll continue with my argument here. Is it going to be fair? Is this law going to be applied fairly to somebody like me? Like, I put myself squarely in this camp, honestly, Len. I will always favor like a natural defense over taking medication. It's not just for, COVID-19 or whatever, but like when I get sick, I don't run to the store and start jamming down whatever over-the-counter meds I can find. I just have a little more coffee to get my heart going and try and keep working out. And I just try and stay in the zone. And sometimes I become a little more irritable, but that's my wife's problem, not mine. And I don't ever run for the medication that everyone seems to be so willing to take. Is that going to be a problem? Like if I start promoting this sort of healthy lifestyle, because it was during COVID, is it going to be a problem going forward? I don't know.
It really depends on how they interpret it.
It does, right? And it's backwards, honestly. There's so many things that we would benefit from, where we would see benefits, broad societal benefits from things like, I've joked in the past, like you should only be able to vote if you can squat 225 pounds. That's a joke, but it's sort of on the right track, honestly. And I look at like the way that this law is worded, and there's more stuff in here. The current state of medical knowledge. Like, what does that mean? Why is that in the law? There is no current state. It's a constantly evolving thing. And I read this stuff and I think, yeah, maybe I'm a little too doomer, a little too tinfoil hat. It won't be applied this way. But I don't have that short a memory. I remember 20 and 21. It was applied this way. You were fired from your job. You were ostracized from society. You were banned from Twitter, Facebook for saying these things. Rogan was, ostracized on every major media outlet. I don't want to go down this path. And I think the French people are right to be upset about this. I hope to see more protests. They love protesting more than they love, eating and drinking down there. So let's see what they got. Vive la résistance, right? That's the term. I encourage them to be upset about this. I would be upset about this if it came here, wouldn't you? I mean, you don't have to answer that, but I would be upset. I would be upset about it.
That's what I would say. Let them eat cake.
Okay, sure.
No, hey, man, I can't talk much. I'll go on to the next story because we got a lot to talk about today. And there is a video that's been released, and it shows how Bitcoin self-custody can be made so much easier. And I'm talking about the use of a Coldcard. Now, my daughter Sabrina and we sat down and I filmed her and she set up a Coldcard. What is a Coldcard? It is a signing device that's used for moving your Bitcoin out of your quote unquote wallet. And generally, Coldcards are regarded favorably because of the fact that you can review the code and it's secure in a number of different reasons. But people think that using a Coldcard is challenging and difficult, but I proved it. My daughter, who's 10, was able to do it, set it up step by step, and she showed the process, including the 3 items you need in order to set it up. You need the Coldcard, an SD card, and some sort of device to hook up the SD card to a computer. And because I'm a huge fan of not hooking up your Coldcard to the computer, keeping it totally air gap. But yeah, she showed off how to set up the PIN, generate the 24 words, and also how to receive Bitcoin using a program called Sparrow, which is somehow indirectly linked to your Coldcard. So anybody that wants to check it out, I'm not sure if it's going to be a link on this video or audio, but it's on the CanadianBitcoiners.com website. You can see it there, or also check our YouTube channel. And it just goes to show you it's not that hard to do self-custody with Bitcoin and to do it right. If a 10-year-old could do it, you can do it.
There's a link in the newsletter, a link in the probably a link in the show notes. Len, it's a 10-year-old, it's 10 minutes, and it's done. That's it. That's the security you need for your Bitcoin. All the times we've talked about how banks are being hacked, they're withholding funds. If you're a Bitcoiner, you know that they're restricting your access to exchanges and whatnot. This is easy stuff, man. So kudos to you, kudos to Sabrina. And if you haven't seen the video yet, you have to see it just for the visual of Sabrina in Len's chair, her head barely poking above the black border underneath the video. It's worth it. It's a good video. So kudos to you guys, man.
She's growing by the day. So maybe next time we film it, she'll be a little bit higher. Anyways, sure. YouTube, they're facing a lot of backlash. Louis Rossmann, we talk about him periodically on, I guess more so on Canadian Bitcoiners show, but even here, I think we've mentioned his name once or twice. But anyways, there's an ongoing battle between he and YouTube. And it's specifically because, well, YouTube is focusing their efforts to try to control content creators, monetarily control them at that, which is huge. So YouTube, the backlash they're receiving is because the removal of videos. And this is showcasing Rossmann. He was highlighting unique approaches to create some money, such as direct subscriptions and stuff like that. And this effectively bypasses the YouTube monetization system. And with this move, it shows that YouTube is very restrictive in terms of how content creators can actually put their content out using their platform and try to monetize that as well. And obviously people are upset with YouTube, but the thing is, we have to understand is YouTube is a centralized service. It's a giant. Unfortunately, it's now a large part of our lives. But still, if you want to play the game, you got to play by their rules.
Yeah.
The only alternative is you got to find or create an alternative platform. There aren't that many out there. Rumble is one that is right now in existence, but hasn't gained much traction. And there's a few other. Odyssey, I think, is another. But still, the reality is everybody flocks mostly to YouTube. It is an absolute giant, and they have so much control over what can be put on their platform, including trying to stop ways to bypass or showing ways to bypass their monetization system. That's just the reality of it. It's too bad. I'm not in agreement with it, but this is just unfortunately the way things are set up. Don't like it? Let's set something else up and try to promote it as much as possible.
He's one of my favorite YouTubers, has been for a long time. And actually, you and I share that interest even without talking about it previously. We both know a little bit about Louis and his journey. He's quite a character, I will say. And a guy who runs a repair shop and has taken on some huge companies in terms of the right to repair legislation in the United States, principally Apple. He has tons of videos on how to get around Apple's kind of nonsense, proprietary repairs only at whatever cost we set, or your device won't work policies. He's got this app called Gray J, and the app, in his words, is meant to allow you, the viewer, the consumer, to subscribe to creators and not to platforms. I really like that ethos. And YouTube is not telling him he has to take down his app, but they are pulling the videos where he talks about it. And I think that's like, again, like YouTube is a giant, Len, for sure. But the fact that there's not too many companies like YouTube, right? And I say this in a couple of ways. One, obviously, just the scale. But the other way I think that YouTube is unique is that it's a company everybody uses, but every single person is looking for a way to get away from. all the users want to get away from the way YouTube does business. The ads are too much. The cost is too much. The restrictions on speech and video content are too much. The monetization is not enough. Every single person who relies on YouTube, either consumer or producer or creator, wants to get away from it. There's not too many companies like that. And what this tells me, when they take down a video from Rossmann, who's clearly one of the biggest creators in the space, I have a YouTube page just for fun. I went to, I opened a Tor browser and went to YouTube. This is like 2 days ago. Rossmann is on the front page there for me when I'm not signed in, right? To me, that tells me there's a number of people watching his videos just based on the trending algorithm. And YouTube taking down videos where he advertises that you can do this kind of subscription stuff without going through YouTube, they're scared because they realize, I think, that everybody wants to get away from their platform. And to me, that's a sign. I don't know what it's a sign of exactly that they're taking these videos down, besides that they're afraid. But there's going to, you know, we talk about this in Bitcoin. We talk about this in security. We may as well talk about it with content too. The monoliths can't pivot fast enough. And so they rely on censorship and silencing. And, you know, eventually we'll rely on legislative capture as well to make sure that they stay at the top of the food chain. And I think if you ignore this, it's, you know, at your peril. One of the reasons I don't like iPhone, among the many reasons that I do, is that there is no side loading of apps. So, you know, YouTube used to have like NewPipe and FTube and stuff like that on the APK store that you could just side load onto your Android phone and get away from advertising and subscription kind of nonsense that YouTube puts up with or forces you to put up with. Are those apps still around on Android? Do you have any idea? Or are they basically like nerfed, neutered now? You can't even use them. It's YouTube only because of just all the different ways that they put the clamps down on third-party providers through the API.
I have no idea. I haven't used that in years, so I can't say if it's still available or not. But can't you sideload in the UK? Oh, sorry, in EU?
You might be able to, but the question is like, can you sideload something that sidesteps all this stuff that YouTube doesn't want you to sidestep? I honestly doubt it. The same way that Twitter locked down their API, right? You can't get Tweetbot or TweetDeck or whatever anymore. They just don't work. So I'd be surprised. Anyway, I don't want to drag this out too long, but I am watching this story. I'm a huge supporter of Louis Rossmann. I encourage everybody who's listening and watching to go check out his videos. He's a great content creator, great commentator, and it just seems like a guy I'd like to get a beer with, honestly. I like him quite a bit.
You know, this is ultimately, it's capitalism. If you like the product, use it. If you don't use it. Yeah. And if people are still using it, regardless of whatever their restrictions are imposing on viewers and creators, there's
no other option. There's no other option right now, right?
No, there are options. You're not as good. That's probably the better way to say it. Like, so you can go to Rumble and watch stuff. Is it as good? Probably not. But the options exist. But if people aren't actively posting or watching Rumble, well, they're voting with their time to watch it on YouTube. And that is capitalism at its finest. Now, whatever restrictions they want, we may not like it, but again, if you're still watching it, you're condoning it. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. And so they'll push this narrative as far as they want. I know I don't want to beat this story to death, but there's somebody I follow, Carl Jobst, and he does a lot of speedrunning videos and everything.
I love speedrunning videos.
He does a really good job, by the way, and he is currently getting sued by one Billy Mitchell. If you know who he is, it's a interesting. I don't want to talk too much about it because he's very litigious. But anyways, Carl Jobst, because his lawsuit was very costly, it's costing him hundreds of thousands of dollars in Australian money, and obviously that's a huge strain for him. He had to pivot his content to maximize the amount of money he was going to receive. So rather than putting stuff out that he liked, that stuff that he enjoyed, that probably may not have given him as much money in terms of from YouTube, he was pivoting to put out content that maximized how much money he could generate to help pay his legal bills. So there you go. Through monetization and the amount of money you get, it will dictate what content creators can do. Yes. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. And that's all I got to say, because there are some options, maybe not as fancy and as sexy as YouTube, but there are options available. Vote with your time.
You're seeing it. You're kind of seeing it, right? Like I follow a lot of sports media content, and Barstool has an exclusive agreement with Rumble for their content. So all the Barstool stuff is on Rumble. They're a huge content house, right? Portnoy, obviously famous for a number of reasons, some good, some bad, but yeah, anyway, not to drag it out. Let's move on.
There's a recent ruling by the European Court of Human Rights. This is the ECHR. And this ruling came down and was related to encryption. Very interesting, this ruling. And they said that it is illegal for governments to compel companies to weaken encryption standards. And this decision has significant implications, including the laws in the UK, because there's one that's proposed, a bill called the Chat Control Bill, and that's would mandate scanning communications for illegal content. So it would enable the government to potentially bypass or overcome these encryption standards to look at information on our phones and so forth. So the weakening of the encryption, think about it, this would impose a significant threat to user privacy, and vulnerabilities would then be exposed to malicious actors out there or criminals to take advantage of. And also, another thing to consider, when you have strong encryption, sensitive information can be passed. Well, you'd be more willing to pass it sensitive information on, such as financial data or personal communications. Mm-hmm. And you'd be less so if it would be less private, of course, and that's going to be more restrictive to the end user. So there are people that are opposing this ruling from the ECHR, and they argue that it hinders law enforcement to combat serious crimes such as terrorism and child sex abuse. And they believe that there is some form of encryption communications, at least the ability to overcome that, is necessary to investigate some of these crimes, including some of it that is being perpetrated by Russian actors.
Unreal.
So I can understand
how
both
many
sides.
buzzwords can they cram in there? Honest to God, how many buzzwords can they cram in there?
This may end up coming here to our shore, so I'm gonna. So yeah, I can understand both sides of the argument. And right now, fortunately, though, you're not impacted as long as you're using a credible piece of software like Signal, for example. Oh, by the way, Signal is going to be moving away from being forced to provide your phone number. You could simply just use a handle or something along those lines. So that is a huge step in the right direction for people that are using Signal. But you know what? Even with Signal, I still suspect that governments may have found a way to crack that. That's just my opinion.
Did you see? Okay, so let's talk about the story first, and then I just want to mention something that I saw the other day that I want to discuss with you. If I could get my bookmarks thing to work, but of course it's notoriously difficult here. So this whole thing about, like I just mentioned, the buzzwords, it's porn, it's kids, it's terrorism, it's Russia. I mean, come on, give me a break. No one believes this. You shouldn't ever have to give up your encryption, especially on your mobile device. There is no rationale for this that would ever convince me otherwise. If they were really serious about preventing some of these things, we would do simple stuff like check people's backgrounds at the border when they immigrate illegally, stuff like that, right? We're not doing that. The US is not doing that. I assume the UK is the same. These problems are popping up all over the place. We're not unique in that manner. I do expect it to come to our shores. Polyev obviously making news this week for talking about the requirement for people to verify their age online before looking at pornography. We've talked about how much of a wedge that can be into a digital ID system. I don't think that's too far-fetched or far afield. Now let's talk a bit about encryption, okay? When I look at the encryption landscape, what are the apps, Len? It's, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, iMessage, and there's probably a couple of other ones like Session and whatnot that are kind of Bitcoin focused and cost Satoshis for use and whatnot. Did you see the other day that Apple moved forward with their iMessage encryption model? So what they are arguably now the most advanced encryption product on the market. And what they've done is they've ensured that if you're ever compromised, if your key is ever compromised, it does something called forward ratcheting. So your encryption key is always changing. It'll only ever be valid for a minute or two. And then after that, the key changes another time. And the phones, I guess, update this between each other separately from a server, which is something I didn't even notice before. You can actually, you can enable that feature in iMessage to have a secret kind of security measure enabled between you and whatever other iMessage number you're talking to. The reason I mention that is because it seems to me that much like the monetary system is starting to show cracks in its armor in terms of the players who are supporting alternatives, think about the Bitcoin ETFs and the issuers there. I think that encryption is going to go the same way, and courts will rule against stuff like this, and some may rule for it. Governments may caw and scream about, protecting certain vulnerable parties, but I just don't think that companies who do encryption are going to go backwards, because it's such a moving target now that anyone can enable SHA-256 level encryption on messaging or data or whatever with basically no difficulty at all. You watch a YouTube video and do it yourself. I don't see this going the other way. I'm very happy to see this story about the Human Rights Court declaring this illegal. And I expect to see similar motions other places, because these guys don't want to have egg on their face any more than anybody else. And I think any competent person can kind of see that the tech has gotten away from the legislation at this point. Law enforcement will suffer. Yes, I admit to that, and I will grant you that. But the alternative cannot be that you get a peek into everybody's personal life vis-a-vis their phone or device. It's just not an option. So I'm happy to see this.
Well, there's been a critical vulnerability that's been discovered in DNSSEC. And this is called key trap. And this is an exploit to launch a denial of service attack against DNS revolvers. The vulnerability exists because DNSSEC requires revolvers to validate responses by trying all possible keys and signatures. So an attacker can create a response with many invalid keys and signatures, forcing the revolver to do unnecessary work and exhaust its resources. And as a result, this could stall the revolver for up to 16 hours, effectively disabling the internet access for users. So the vulnerability was discovered by researchers from the National Research Center for Applied Cybersecurity, and this was in Germany. And this affects all DNSSEC validating DNS revolvers, including those by major internet service providers and content delivery networks. And this can be, as I mentioned, exploited by actors to disrupt internet access for a wide variety of users, including businesses, governments, and individuals. And there are a number of mitigating strategies that can be imposed or implemented to protect against the key trap attacks, but no single solution is perfect. Some of these mitigating strategies include installing security patches, configuring DNS revolvers to use specific algorithms, and deploying additional security members. But one easy way to protect yourself is to be an easy DNS customer, because the reason is they do not use DNS revolvers. And as such, they're not at risk for this type of attack. And your website could stay up and won't be taken down by this method. So yeah, there you go. Another good reason why, if you're not yet a customer of Easy DNS, certainly consider it. And I would suggest moving your business there right
Not
away.
being a customer of Easy DNS is definitely something that will lead to your eventual downfall. So if you don't move over, you're in a boatload of trouble. I don't have anything else to add to that. Mark is taking care of everything there for you and me. So great. Let's move on.
Okay, this is interesting because people are rallying behind this, the Taylor Swift deepfake that was some time ago.
Yeah.
And it's a way, they're being used as a way to change legislation to combat the creation and distribution of this, because I don't know, man, this is messed up. So think about this. If they're going to change legislation and make it much more challenging for people to even use AI and whatever, do we really need one of these digital safety czars that could have broad powers out there to take down whatever content they want?
No.
Potentially limit speech through censorship?
No.
In fact, even former CRTC Commissioner Peter Menzies, he suggests proposing amending Section 162 of the Criminal Code as a way to try to achieve what they want to achieve without having too much broad powers. And by doing this amendment, it would make it explicitly illegal to use deepfake to create non-consensual pornography. And it would provide clear framework for addressing the issue, but it would also avoid potential infringements on freedom of speech. This is a very complex issue. This is something that is just developing. Many people are being impacted as a result. And in fact, because it's Taylor Swift, I don't know how she became so popular, but there's, the fact that you do something with her that's against her, you're going to have to deal with all, what do they call them? Swifties, where the fuck it is. But anyways, it drives me bonkers that you're using this as a way to try to push push legislation to impose less freedom of speech and more censorship. I don't like it, but you know what? This is the world we live in, and I'm going to have to adhere to it, but I'll do what I can to fight this type of legislation.
Yeah, I'm totally out on this. By the way, I've seen the deepfakes, a handful of them anyway. It's not like they're even good. Like, I don't know what kind of deranged individual looks at that and gets his rocks off, but it's the thing we have to be careful about with AI is that you are putting yourself in a position as an electorate, right? You're putting yourself in a position where the government will say that these things are illegal, they're creating harm. They'll use the same words as always. I think children, pornography, terrorism, misinformation, blah, 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 hurt and harm is in this article from Menzies. I don't think it matters, honestly. Like I don't ever want to see, as he describes, these are his words, by the way, ready, fire, aim powers, looking down at anything that I'm writing, reading, consuming, creating, and telling me that it's not appropriate. Let the market decide. That's one, that is really the common theme here with a lot of stuff we talk about, whether it's in money or in, information. It's a market of freedom and free ideas and free actors, rational actors, as the term goes, making decisions about what they consume, where they spend their money, and where they spend their time. And maybe more importantly, Len, as you've mentioned a few times over the last few months, where you plant your flag, right? If this kind of stuff keeps happening here in the States, then you got to go somewhere else. I think, it's difficult to raise a family in this environment, difficult to do a lot of things in this environment. So I hope this doesn't get any traction. But as I mentioned last week, I do expect digital IDs to take hold here. And this is not too much further down the road, right? It's not a difficult thing to envision. Once you have one, it's much easier to launch some of these other programs. So, difficult to stomach, but I think it's probably something that's in the pipeline. Question is, how long is the pipeline? I think you and me may disagree on that. I think it's pretty short. We're looking at under 2 or 3 years.
That's a point of contention between you guys. But either way, it's time to start looking into purchasing a small island in the Caribbean and setting up shop over there. I wonder if we do so, does Amazon deliver? And if so, how long does it take? But either way,
I'll probably cancel my Prime membership if we end up moving to the Caribbean. I'll tell you that much.
Still, it's a net gain, I believe. But anyway, yeah. we'll scout it out this weekend.
Yeah. Is that it? Are we done? That's the end of the...
Yeah, man.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for coming back. That was another Access of Easy for you guys. Don't forget, read the newsletter, accessofeasy.com. You can go there, subscribe, and get this good stuff in your email every week, just like we do, except you'll get it a day or two later. Subscribe on YouTube, Access of Easy, or wherever you get your podcasts, and listen to the latest and greatest in data breaching and overreaching every week. Great way to sum up some of the important stuff from the week that was. So until next time, I'm Joey, that's Len, and we'll see ya.
Take care.